Jim.
Kayleigh, you mentioned Dr. King. He likely would not have approved of what took place Monday evening across from the White House, as you probably know. If the White House president and his team had to do it all over again, would you have gassed and pummeled protesters to clear the park so the president could have a photo op?
So let me first address no tear gas was used and no rubber bullets were used. So again, no tear gas was used, no rubber bullets were used.
Why are you making that distinction? Chemical agents were used.
Let me back up and
Episcopal priest who said she was gassed. Others say they were tear gassed in that area.
Well, no one was tear gassed. Let me make that clear. That's been confirmed by DOD and by Park Services as well. So let me go back and address what happened because there's been a lot of misreporting. First, I would note that these protests that were going on, in the morning, AG Barr had determined that we needed to expand the perimeter by 1 block on each side. He was surprised, AG Barr, when he arrived at the White House to see that that perimeter had not been moved. So he said that we needed to get going with moving that perimeter. He told the officers that out there. That was late afternoon. So that decision was made in the morning, first of all. The protesters were told 3 times over loudspeaker that they needed to move. And what happened was it grew increasingly unruly. There were projectiles being thrown at officers. Frozen water bottles were being thrown at officers. Various other projectiles. And the officers had no other choice than in that moment to act and make sure that they were safe and that the perimeter was pushed back because, as we all know, a church was burning in that very area the night before. So the appropriate action was taken. It was burning the night before, which enforced the decision to move the perimeter on each side by a block so that church would no longer be in harm's way by the rioters. But it's absolutely uncalled for to throw bricks, absolutely uncalled for to throw water bottles that are frozen at police officers.
Don't you agree, Kayleigh, that the vast majority of those protesters were doing so peacefully and that many of them did not hear those warnings and were simply just pushed out of the way, just forced out, pummeled out of the way by their fellow Americans, police officers? You sent in members of the military to deal with this. I mean, what do you say to Americans who look at what happened on Monday and find that to be appalling?
Well, let me note the National Guard was utilized across Washington, D.C. The military was not. There is a distinction, and I would say that it is uncalled for to throw bricks at officers, uncalled for to throw frozen water bottles at officers. And they also had received intelligence that there were calls for violence against police officers, and they found caches of glass bottles, baseball bats, and metal poles hidden along the streets. When an officer is at risk, they have the right to defend themselves. They did so peaceably. There were no fatalities, no severe injuries.
For a press secretary who vowed to never lie, it sure didn't take her much time before she did exactly that. This is Kayleigh McEnany carrying water for her boss as she attempts to justify the White House effectively gassing peaceful protesters so that Trump could do this. That's why protesters, American citizens, were gassed, so that Trump could awkwardly lift a Bible into the air. Now, right off the bat, McEnany suggests that no tear gas was used, which is quite the claim considering that according to the CDC, tear gas was in fact used. The compound that was used in Lafayette Square is known as CN, a type of mace, which the CDC considers a type of tear gas. So unless Kayleigh McEnany is operating under her own scientific standards, then she's lying when she says that protesters weren't tear gassed. McEnany goes on then to lie about the state of the protest, wherein she claims that the use of force was justified because the protesters were apparently attacking the officers, when in reality, we've already seen that the protest was peaceful. Reporters were in the crowd in what was clearly regarded as a calm protest. The reason for breaking it up was obvious. After Trump's speech in the Rose Garden, he wanted to make an appearance at St. John's Episcopal Church. And because he's not capable of actually coming into contact with American citizens who aren't fawning all over him at one of his rallies, well, of course he needed the park cleared first. The fact is, when McEnany says that the protest was unruly, that projectiles were being thrown, it's just an arbitrary catch-all of an excuse. The administration has realized that all you have to say is that the police were in danger, even though there is literal video footage proving that the crowd was peaceful, and then suddenly the National Guard and police officers have carte blanche to attack American citizens. Why? Because Trump needed his photo op. Consider too that A, Americans have the right to assemble. It's right there, first article of the United States Constitution, the same document that conservatives fall over themselves parading when it comes to the Second Amendment, but when the First Amendment is in question, Well, Kayleigh McEnany said that someone threw a water bottle, so it's time to throw the Constitution in the trash. And B, these protesters had until 7 p.m. before the curfew took effect, and yet police moved in just after 6 p.m. Because again, this wasn't about the crowd, this wasn't about the curfew, this wasn't about anything other than the fact that Donald Trump needed a photo. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, the civil rights of American citizens, were trampled on because a budding authoritarian needed some footage for a propaganda video. But the most jarring part of the White House's response is not only that they can defend these indefensible actions, but that they're so deluded that they actually think it's praiseworthy, that it's noble. Kayleigh McEnany actually had the audacity to liken Trump having the park cleared of protesters with tear gas to Churchill surveying the bombing damage after World War II and Bush throwing out the first pitch after 9/11.
The president wanted to send a very powerful message that we will not be overcome by looting, by rioting, by burning. This is not what defines America. And going and standing by St. John's Church was a very important moment. And I would note that through all of time, we've seen presidents and leaders across the world who have had leadership moments and very powerful symbols that were important for a nation to see at any given time to show a message of resilience and determination. Like Churchill, we saw him inspecting the bombing damage. It sent a powerful message of leadership to the British people. And George W. Bush throwing out the ceremonial first pitch after 9/11. And Jimmy Carter putting on a sweater to encourage energy savings. And George H.W. Bush signing the Americans with Disabilities Act, flanked by 2 disabled Americans. And for this president, it was powerful and important to send a message that the rioters, the looters, the anarchists, they will not prevail, that burning churches are not what America's about. And that moment, holding the Bible up, is something that has been widely hailed by Franklin Graham and others. And it was a very important symbol for the American people to see that we will get through this through unity and through faith.
It's not just that this administration lies. It's not just that this administration has disdain for the rule of law. It's not just that this administration revels in corruption. They're proud of it. They wear it as a badge of honor. What happened in that park was uniquely un-American, and the fact that this administration considers it a source of pride pretty much tells you everything you need to know. If you like that video, please check out my brand new podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I'll cover the most important political stories of the week and interview major players in the world of politics. Available now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out and subscribe now.